Welcome to today's exploration of one of Colorado's most baffling historical mysteries. Before we begin, I invite you to leave a comment telling us where you're watching from and what time it is in your location. We're curious to know when and where these forgotten stories find their audience. The Silverbrook case of 1923 remains one of the most perplexing mysteries in Colorado history. It begins with a simple fact. On January 14, 1923, the entire population of Silverbrook, a prosperous mining town nestled in the Rocky Mountains, vanished without explanation. Their absence was discovered when supply wagons arrived 2 days later to find an empty town, breakfast dishes still on tables, lanterns ready to be lit, and the clock tower frozen at exactly 3:47 a.m. What made this case particularly unsettling wasn't merely the disappearance itself, but what was left behind. The Henderson Mining Company safe stood open and empty, though no robbery had been reported. Mining equipment had been deliberately disabled. Most disturbing was a strange symbol painted on multiple buildings throughout the town, a spiral within a triangle that appeared nowhere in local records or indigenous art. At the center of this mystery was Jacob Henderson, 45, owner of the mining company. A Norwegian immigrant who had struck silver in 1919, Henderson had built Silverbrook from nothing. County records show his wife Clara, 42, was a former schoolteacher from Boston, and their daughter Iris, 16, kept detailed diaries that would later provide crucial clues to what occurred. The family had established themselves as respected, if somewhat private, members of the community. Jacob operated a profitable silver mine employing over 100 men. Clara was known for her extensive library and her work establishing the town school. Iris, described in local newspaper accounts as studious and observant, rarely ventured beyond the town's boundaries. What followed their disappearance was an investigation plagued by inconsistencies, missing records, and what some would later describe as deliberate misdirection. This is the story of that investigation, the theories it generated, and the shadow it continues to cast over the Colorado Rockies to this day. Prior to the mass evacuation, strange reports had begun filtering out of Silverbrook. In November 1922, several miners reported unusual sounds deep in the shafts, rhythmic tapping that didn't match any drilling pattern. Some claimed their tools vibrated even when idle, and compasses would spin uselessly in certain sections of the mine. According to testimony later given by neighboring ranchers, miners from Silverbrook had begun showing signs of distress in the weeks before the disappearance. They spoke of headaches, vivid dreams, and a persistent humming sound that seemed to come from within the mountain itself. On December 28, 1922, Jacob Henderson sent an urgent telegram to the Colorado School of Mines. Discovered anomaly at 800-foot level. Request geological consultation immediately. Matter of unusual scientific interest. No response was recorded, and no geologist officially visited. Or if they did, no documentation of their findings survived. Perhaps most telling was an encounter described by Thomas Garrett, a supply merchant who visited Silverbrook on January 10, 1923. In a statement given to Denver authorities, Garrett recalled being met at the company office by Henderson, who appeared haggard and distracted. Though Garrett had always been welcomed for coffee during his monthly visits, on this occasion Henderson conducted their business hurriedly on the office porch. Garrett reported hearing what he described as a low, continuous vibration, like machinery running, but steadier, almost musical, coming from the direction of the mine. When he inquired about it, Henderson abruptly paid him in full for 6 months of supplies in advance and said only, "We've gone too deep, Mr. Garrett. Found something we shouldn't have disturbed. Best you don't come back for a while." The Henderson family's daily routines had been well established over their 4 years in Colorado. Jacob typically spent mornings at the mine supervising operations. Clara taught at the town school. Iris helped with both the household and her mother's teaching duties. Their lives followed the predictable rhythms of frontier mining town existence, until something disrupted that rhythm entirely. According to a letter Clara wrote to her sister in Boston dated December 30, 1922, one of the last known communications from Silverbrook, Jacob had become obsessed with what he'd found in the deepest section of the mine. Clara's letter mentioned that her husband had begun spending entire nights underground, claiming he needed to understand the pattern before it's too late. She provided no details, stating only that Jacob had sworn her to secrecy until he could determine whether the discovery posed any danger. This letter takes on particular importance when considered alongside an entry in the mining company's operations ledger from January 5, 1923, All standard mining suspended. Full crew dedicated to sealing lower galleries. Emergency protocols in effect. The final documented interaction with anyone from Silverbrook came on January 13, 1923. Railroad agent Martin Burke recorded selling tickets to 3 groups totaling approximately 200 people, all departing on different trains the following morning. In his statement to investigators, Burke recalled that the passengers seemed uncommonly organized, as if following a rehearsed plan. Several were carrying identical leather-bound books, which Burke assumed were Bibles, though none would confirm this when asked. Most disturbing was Burke's recollection of Henderson's final words before boarding: "Tell anyone who asks that we left voluntarily. Tell them Silverbrook is closed permanently. Tell them the mine must never be reopened." The discovery of Silverbrook's abandonment came on January 16, when supply wagons arrived to find every building empty. The teamster immediately rode to the nearest telegraph office and alerted Denver authorities. Sheriff Thomas Blackwood arrived 2 days later with 6 deputies and a county medical examiner. Their initial survey revealed several disturbing details beyond the empty town. In his official report, Blackwood noted that while the town showed no signs of violence or panic, there were clear indications of planned evacuation. Livestock had been released from pens. Food stores had been left intact. Personal valuables, including a considerable amount of cash in the company's safe, remained untouched. Most puzzling was a series of symbols found throughout the town: the spiral within a triangle painted on building walls, carved into mine support beams, and even scratched into the frozen ground near the sealed mine entrance. The mine itself had been deliberately sealed with explosives, though in a way that suggested professional demolition rather than panic. Support timbers had been carefully removed from upper levels, causing controlled collapses that would make reopening extremely difficult. When deputies forced entry into Henderson's private office, they found detailed geological surveys showing an unidentified crystalline formation at the 800-foot level, accompanied by extensive notes in Henderson's handwriting. One passage read, "The formation resonates in response to human presence. Effects intensify with proximity and duration of exposure. Miners report auditory phenomena: voices, music, mechanical sounds with no source. Yesterday, 3 men claimed to hear the same conversation simultaneously, though none could identify the language. Whatever this is, we are not equipped to study it safely." It was at this point that the investigation took its first unusual turn. According to Deputy Raymond Walsh's personal diary, discovered among his effects after his death in 1958, Sheriff Blackwood received a visitor on the evening of January 19th, a man who identified himself as Dr. Lawrence Foster from the United States Geological Survey. No official record of this visit exists in the sheriff's reports. Walsh described Foster as a lean man of perhaps 50 years, dressed in city clothes unsuitable for our winter, who spoke with an educated Eastern accent and carried papers that satisfied the sheriff immediately. Following Foster's arrival, Blackwood ordered his deputies to collect all documents, maps, and samples from the Henderson office and mine entrance. These materials were loaded into Foster's carriage, and by dawn, the government representative had departed with virtually all physical evidence. The official investigation was concluded on January 23 with a brief notation in county records stating, "Population of Silverbrook voluntarily abandoned town. No evidence of criminal activity. Property reverts to county for unpaid taxes." No further action was recommended. This might have been the end of the story had it not been for a discovery made in 1947. A Denver antique dealer named Elizabeth Morton purchased a collection of books from an estate sale. Among them was a leather-bound journal identified as belonging to Iris Henderson. The diary, which covered the period from November 1922 to January 13, 1923, provided a chilling account of Silverbrook's final months. Early entries described normal teenage concerns: school lessons, friendships, the harsh Colorado winter. But beginning in late November, Iris's writings took on a darker tone. She mentioned her father's increasing obsession with something found in the lower mine levels, her mother's growing anxiety, and strange dreams that many townspeople began experiencing simultaneously. On December 20, 1922, Iris wrote, "Father brought home a small fragment of the crystal he found. It sits on his desk, and when you stand near it, you can feel something, like standing next to a hive of bees, that same vibration in the air. But there's no sound you can actually hear. Just a feeling in your bones." Mother made him return it to the mine the next day. She said it makes her head ache and her thoughts feel jumbled, as if someone else's memories are mixing with her own. An entry from January 3, 1923. The entire town gathered at the community hall tonight. Father explained what he's learned from studying the formation. He used words I don't fully understand. Resonance, frequency, dimensional interference. He said the crystal isn't just rock. It's more like an antenna or a doorway. And we've been broadcasting our presence to something on the other side. He said we have to leave. All of us. And we can never tell anyone exactly why, or others might come here and make the same mistake we did. Everyone voted to go. Even Mr. Patterson, who's lived here since 1895, agreed it was necessary. The final entry, dated January 13, 1923. We leave tomorrow morning. Father spent all last week sealing the mine with help from the crew. He says it should hold for decades, maybe longer. Mother has been teaching us what to say if anyone asks, that the mine played out, that we're seeking better opportunities elsewhere. Simple explanations that people will accept. But the truth is much stranger. Father says we opened something that was meant to stay closed. The humming has grown so loud that even I can hear it now, though they say children are less sensitive. Last night I dreamed I was walking through corridors that couldn't exist inside a mountain, following lights that weren't quite lights toward something that felt both ancient and aware. When I woke, Father was standing at my door. He said he had the same dream. So did Mother. So did half the town. Whatever is down there, it's trying to reach us. And Father says if we stay much longer, it might succeed. So we scatter to the winds, we bury this chapter of our lives, and we pray that no one ever digs too deep in these mountains again. Through railroad and census records, investigators eventually traced most of Silverbrook's former residents. They had indeed scattered across the country, some to California, others to the East Coast, a few to Canada. When contacted by researchers in later years, most refused to discuss Silverbrook. Those who did speak offered only vague explanations about the mine playing out or seeking new opportunities. A handful, in their final years, provided more troubling accounts. In 1956, a man named Carl Johansson, who had worked as a mine foreman in Silverbrook, gave a deathbed interview to a local historian. He described the crystal formation as like nothing in any geology textbook, perfectly geometric, almost artificial in appearance, but embedded in rock that was millions of years old. He spoke of the sounds, the shared dreams, the growing sensation that something was waking up down there, responding to our presence, learning from us. When asked why the entire town agreed to leave, Johansson replied, "Henderson understood before the rest of us. Every day we worked near that thing, it got stronger. The humming got louder. The dreams got clearer. Some of the men started speaking in their sleep, languages none of us recognized. Henderson said if we stayed, we'd become something else. Not dead, but not really ourselves anymore. So we left. And we agreed, every last one of us, that we'd take the secret to our graves. Because if word got out, others would come. Scientists, government men, fortune seekers. And they'd dig. And they'd find it. And the same thing would happen to them, only they wouldn't know to leave in time." In 1987, a team of geologists from the Colorado School of Mines received permission to survey the sealed Silverbrook mine. What they found both validated and complicated the Henderson accounts. At approximately 800 feet below the surface, the team discovered an unusual crystalline formation, a naturally occurring quartz structure that displayed unexpected piezoelectric properties. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, lead geologist on the expedition, reported that the formation did indeed generate electromagnetic fluctuations when exposed to vibration. In theory, human proximity could produce measurable effects. The formation could potentially amplify seismic vibrations or even bioelectric fields, Mitchell noted in her report. If miners were working in close proximity for extended periods, the cumulative effects on the nervous system could have been significant, potentially causing shared hallucinations, anxiety, or altered states of consciousness. The expedition was cut short after only 3 days when several team members reported severe headaches, auditory hallucinations, and what Dr. Mitchell described as a persistent sensation of being observed by something just beyond perception. Modern equipment recorded electromagnetic fluctuations that exceeded what the crystalline structure alone should produce, fluctuations that seemed to intensify in response to human presence. Most disturbing was an incident on the final day of the survey. Mitchell's assistant, David Torres, claimed to have heard distinct voices speaking in what he described as almost English, familiar enough to seem like language, strange enough to be incomprehensible. When the team reviewed their audio recordings, they found unusual low-frequency patterns underlying the ambient cave sounds, patterns that didn't match any known geological or biological source. The mine was resealed following the expedition. Dr. Mitchell's full report remains classified under a provision citing potential public safety concerns related to unusual geological hazards. Attempts to obtain the complete findings through Freedom of Information Act requests have been denied, with officials citing exemptions for ongoing research of national interest. In 1991, a researcher named Patricia Drummond uncovered a curious set of documents while investigating industrial safety regulations from the early 20th century. Among files related to mining operations, she found a brief memorandum dated January 18, 1923, from someone identified only as LF, possibly the Dr. Lawrence Foster mentioned in Deputy Walsh's diary, to the director of what was then called the Bureau of Mines. The memorandum, partially redacted, contained the following legible text: Silverbrook situation contained as directed. Population relocated without incident. Sample of formation secured for analysis. Preliminary tests confirm anomalous electromagnetic properties consistent with reports. Recommend indefinite closure of site and continued monitoring. Local authorities have been instructed to discourage any further interest in the abandoned town. Cover story of economic failure should prove sufficient. This document confirms several key points: government involvement from the investigation's earliest stages, the existence of anomalous properties in whatever was found at Silverbrook, and a deliberate effort to suppress public interest in the case. Most importantly, it suggests the residents weren't fleeing in panic, but were relocated, implying some level of coordination with authorities. A second document, discovered in 2003 and dated February 7, 1923, provides additional context. This report, authored by an unnamed technical consultant, states, analysis of Silverbrook samples continues. The crystalline structure exhibits properties unlike any naturally occurring mineral yet documented. Most concerning is its apparent responsiveness to human neural activity. Electromagnetic output measurably increases when in proximity to conscious observers and appears to synchronize with brain wave patterns. The implications require careful consideration. If the formation is indeed acting as some form of receiver or amplifier, as Henderson theorized, the question becomes, receiving from where and amplifying what? Henderson's decision to seal the site was prudent. Recommend the site remain undisturbed indefinitely. Over the decades, researchers identified several descendants of Silverbrook residents willing to share family stories. Most spoke only under conditions of anonymity, revealing a persistent fear that discussing the events too openly might draw unwanted attention. In 2003, a woman named Sarah Henderson Miller came forward claiming to be Iris Henderson's granddaughter. She possessed several items from Silverbrook, including Iris's diary, photographs of the town, and a small fragment of crystal that she kept in a lead-lined box. My grandmother told me stories, Henderson Miller explained in a television interview. She said Silverbrook was a good town, a happy place, until they dug too deep. She said whatever they found down there was old, older than human civilization, and it was still active, still aware, still waiting for something. The whole town agreed to leave because staying meant losing themselves. Not dying, but changing into something else. My grandmother lived to be 94, and until the day she died, she refused to return to Colorado. She said the mountains remember, and what sleeps beneath them only pretends to sleep. When asked about the crystal fragment, Henderson Miller explained that it was the same piece Jacob Henderson had temporarily brought home in December 1922. Iris kept it as a reminder. She said it doesn't do anything dangerous on its own. It's inert unless you bring it near other large crystal formations or certain types of electronic equipment. But she insisted it be kept in lead because she said it listens. Those were her exact words. It listens. I don't know what that means, but I've honored her wishes. Several other descendants shared similar accounts, stories passed down through generations about the town that had to be abandoned, the mine that must never be reopened, and the unspoken agreement among all survivors to protect the secret. One recurring theme in these accounts is the idea that the Silverbrook residents didn't flee in fear of immediate danger, but rather in recognition that continued exposure would fundamentally alter them in ways they couldn't accept or control. The spiral within triangle symbol found throughout Silverbrook has never been satisfactorily explained. It doesn't match any known indigenous artwork from the region, nor any mining company insignia from the period. Several researchers have noted similarities to symbols used in various mystical traditions to represent gateways or portals, but there's no evidence the Henderson family or other Silverbrook residents had any interest in such matters. One intriguing theory was proposed by Dr. Marcus Ashford, a mathematician who studied the symbol in 2007. He noted that the specific proportions of the spiral and triangle conform to certain geometric relationships found in quantum physics, specifically visual representations of wave function collapse and dimensional folding. It's as if someone in 1923 was trying to draw a diagram of quantum mechanical principles that wouldn't be fully understood for decades, Ashford observed. The question is whether Henderson somehow intuited these relationships through his study of the crystal formation, or whether he was replicating something he saw, a symbol or pattern associated with the formation itself. Today, the site of Silverbrook lies within the boundaries of the Pike National Forest. No structures remain standing. The mine entrance is buried beneath decades of rockfall and deliberate fill. Only foundation stones and a few rusted pieces of equipment mark where a thriving community once stood. Forest rangers acknowledge the location's history but report no unusual activity. However, hikers occasionally mention feelings of unease when passing through the area, and some have reported electronic equipment malfunctions, dead batteries, spinning compass needles, static interference on radios. The Forest Service attributes these experiences to the power of suggestion and natural geological features common in the region. In 2015, a group of university students camping in the general vicinity reported experiencing synchronized dreams over 3 consecutive nights, dreams of walking through geometric tunnels toward a pulsing light while hearing a low, rhythmic humming. None of the students had prior knowledge of the Silverbrook case. When they learned of the historical connection, they attempted to locate the sealed mine entrance but found nothing conclusive. However, their GPS devices consistently malfunctioned in one particular ravine, behavior they described as impossible, like the coordinates themselves were unstable. As our understanding of quantum physics, consciousness studies, and electromagnetic fields has advanced, some aspects of the Silverbrook case have taken on new significance. The resonance and neural synchronization effects described in various accounts bear conceptual similarities to phenomena explored in modern consciousness research, particularly studies examining how electromagnetic fields might influence brain activity. Dr. Robert Lindholm, a physicist specializing in bioelectromagnetic interactions, reviewed available Silverbrook documentation in 2012. His analysis suggested that a large piezoelectric crystal formation, under specific conditions, could theoretically generate electromagnetic fields strong enough to affect human neural activity. The brain operates on electrical signals, Lindholm explained. A sufficiently powerful external field could potentially influence neural patterns, not controlling thoughts, but creating interference patterns that might manifest as shared experiences, altered perceptions, or synchronized mental states. If the Silverbrook formation was generating fields and frequencies that resonated with human brainwave patterns, the effects described in historical accounts become less paranormal and more within the realm of undiscovered physics. However, Lindholm noted significant gaps in this explanation. The reported intensification of effects over time suggests something more than passive resonance. The accounts describe what sounds like adaptive behavior, the formation responding to human presence, growing stronger with exposure. That implies either a level of complexity we don't associate with mineral structures, or there's an additional factor we're not seeing in the available records. For those who study the Silverbrook case, certain questions persist. What exactly was the nature of the crystalline formation discovered at the 800-foot level? Were its unusual properties purely natural phenomena, or as some accounts suggest, was it something created, either by an unknown ancient civilization or through processes we don't yet understand? Why did the federal government take such immediate interest in what should have been a local matter? The speed with which the unnamed Dr. Foster appeared and the subsequent classification of findings suggests knowledge of similar phenomena elsewhere. Could Silverbrook have been one of multiple sites exhibiting such properties? Most troubling, if the formation is still there, sealed beneath rock and earth, is it still active? Do its effects persist even in the absence of human contact, or has the lack of exposure for a century rendered it dormant? And if someone were to accidentally breach the seal, through mining, drilling, or simple geological shift, would the same effects manifest again? Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of the Silverbrook incident is how effectively it was forgotten. Within a generation, the town was little more than a footnote in Colorado mining history. The mass evacuation, the strange discoveries, the government intervention, all faded into obscurity, known only to a few researchers and the descendants of those who lived through it. This silence appears to have been deliberate. The survivors kept their word, speaking little of what they experienced. Authorities actively discouraged investigation. And over time, the lack of dramatic documentation, no bodies, no disaster, no crime, meant the story generated little sustained interest outside academic circles. Yet for those who have delved deeply into the case, a troubling pattern emerges. The coordinated evacuation, the sealed mine, the persistent electromagnetic anomalies, the government's continued classification of findings a century later, all suggest that whatever was discovered at Silverbrook remains a matter of concern to someone, somewhere. As one former Silverbrook resident wrote in an anonymous letter to a historical society in 1959, "We made a pact, all of us who left that town. We agreed to forget, to move on, to never speak of what we heard in those tunnels. Not because we were afraid of being disbelieved, but because we were afraid of being believed." Henderson was right. Some knowledge carries a weight too heavy to bear. We found something in those mountains that was never meant to be found. And the kindest thing we could do for the world was to bury that knowledge along with the mine shaft that held it. I'm old now. Most of us are gone. But I pray that seal holds, because I remember the dreams. I remember the voices. I remember the growing certainty that whatever was down there was waking up, learning about us, reaching toward our world from some place we can't see or understand. We ran from Silverbrook not because we were cowards, but because we valued our humanity enough to protect it. May God keep that mine sealed forever. Today, if you travel to the location where Silverbrook once stood, you'll find no warning signs, no historical markers, no indication that anything unusual ever occurred there. Just dense Colorado forest, quiet and beautiful, indistinguishable from thousands of other mountain valleys. But those who know the story, the descendants who carry the secret, the researchers who study the documents, the few government officials aware of the classified findings, they know that beneath those trees and rocks, sealed behind collapsed tunnels and deliberate demolition, something waits. Not malevolent, perhaps, but undeniably other. A formation of crystal that responds to human consciousness, that generates fields that synchronize minds, that may be natural or may be something created for purposes we can only guess. The people of Silverbrook made their choice. They walked away from prosperity, from their homes, from the life they'd built, because they recognized that some discoveries come with prices too high to pay. They scattered across the continent, kept their silence, and took their secret to their graves. We can only hope they were successful. We can only pray that the seal holds. Because if Iris Henderson's final diary entry is to be believed, what sleeps beneath Silverbrook sleeps lightly, waiting for the next tremor, the next drill, the next curious explorer who might unknowingly awaken something that was never meant to wake. The Colorado mountains keep many secrets. The Silverbrook incident reminds us that some of those secrets may be better left undiscovered. What happened in those deep tunnels remains a mystery that spans over a century. But one thing is certain, the people who were there believed it was serious enough to abandon everything and never look back. Perhaps we should respect their judgment. Share your thoughts in the comments below. And remember, some doors, once opened, can never be fully closed.